And these are the issues we're presenting today to our Viewpoints guests for commentary. The shockingly gruesome attack aboard the Greyhound, traveling from Edmonton to Winnipeg. Why is the prevailing question? A jury has decided that a man now owes his jilted fiancée $150,000 for breaking off their engagement. And a total ban on the use of all electronic devices while driving could be on the way. Now let's meet our Viewpoints guests. Vernal Banton is a life skills coach and author of What Often Wins. And Dr. Anthony Hutchinson is CEO of the Brampton Neighborhood Resource Center. And you, the viewer, you are our third guest. Feel free to call in at any time with any of your comments regarding any of the issues we're discussing today. And the first issue, first of all, I want to warn you that just discussing this issue can be disturbing to some, so it's important for you to know that off the bat. I want you first, and this is how I'm going to start. I know that our control room normally shows the articles that we put up, but I want to show a picture first before we move ahead. Take a look at this picture. We've all heard about it by now, the fellow on the Greyhound bus out west that was literally beheaded by a fellow passenger. What made this story so sick and so sad, this young boy that you see here in the picture, 22 years old, he's actually holding the child of a friend, known by his friends to be quiet, to be peaceful, as he was sitting down, resting on that bus. 40 to 50 times this perpetrator stabbed this boy and went so far as to decapitate him, taking his head off the bus. A gruesome story. I've heard people talking about it everywhere. Some of the articles that have been addressing some of the issues are right here, for instance, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. Some people are actually asking the question, why? One report says, well, he's psychotic. Well, of course we know he's psychotic. That doesn't say much. Another article, commentary comes out saying, should the passengers on the bus have done more to save that boy? Other commentaries saying, well, what do you want them to do? They themselves could have gotten hurt. They were too much in shock. We want to hear your thoughts. Another comment is this. Do you believe he should be given a fair trial, the way we do in our system? Costs a lot of money for this thing. This was a gruesome situation that had a lot of witnesses. Should he go through a long trial, or should it just be perhaps a judge, considering how many witnesses there were, taken away? We have them here in the paper. I mean, lots to discuss here, and we want to hear your thoughts about it. I'm going to start with you on this one, Anthony. First of all, when you saw this article and how gruesome it was, what was the first thing that came to your mind? Well,
when you look at a story like this, you obviously know that there are mental health issues, but you have to be careful not to blow people who suffer mental health issues, you know, hold them all in the same light or blow it out of proportion.
Definitely.
And so we have to be careful with that. I think what's most horrifying about the story is not the crime itself, but it's the face of the crime, that it was a singular crime. When a tragic and serious incident occurs for one person, it's a tragedy. If it's a group of people, a plane crash, it becomes a statistic. And the way that these incidents play themselves out in the media connect with us at a much more salient level when we can identify with the singular person. And I think that's what makes this story so powerful and tragic.
That's what makes it so powerful? I think what makes it powerful was how gruesome it was. That this boy was sitting back on the bus, actually sleeping. To think that somebody would come up on him here, stab him 40 to 50 times, and behead him right on a bus.
But when you look
to me, it's the gruesome nature of the crime.
But when you look at the 800,000 people who were treated in the exact same manner in Rwanda, the world didn't even bat an eye to it. And those people were chopped up.
It's close to home.
Exactly. And so, like I said, it's a statistic when 800,000 people in the world turned their eye on it, and the world leaders did nothing about it. This is one incident that something seriously did go wrong, and it's tragic for the family and the friends of this young man. But I think about, you multiply that by over, millions for what happened in Rwanda, and yet we still, don't stand up and take accountability for what happened over there.
Vernal, how do you see this?
Well, there's a multi-layer of many issues. It's very multidimensional because I think first and foremost you have to look at the safety of when you travel on public transportation. That to me has to be the starting ground, because if the safety was a little bit more beefed up, it's hard to even determine how to do that, because what are we going to do? Have people checking if you have firearms or knives or a metal detector? You don't know what to do. And then the actual incident to take place right there, so public. It's more than horrific. It's more than gruesome. It's catastrophic. And I think.
What about Anthony's comment, though? That this is happening in places like Rwanda. How would you see this from that point of view?
I just think. I mean, obviously, there's a major issue in terms of wherever it happens in the world, because you know, a murder is significant no matter who or where it happens. I think what makes a story, I think, have a different twist is the fact that it's such a public place, like where anybody could pay their fare and go on. And I think that's where you're getting to health and safety issues. And that's not to negate the actual transportation company that's provided the service or any other transportation company. The fact is, it's in public place that this is happening. So in other words, people are going to be in fear for their life, not just when they're, like, for example, potentially going to a large crowd, but now on public transportation. And I think that gives a really negative twist towards the public transportation industry.
Do any of you believe that the passengers on the bus should have done more, according to some commentary?
I don't think they could have, respectfully, only based on the fact that, you know, when you're being confronted with violence, you have to act in good faith that, you know, the police has to be involved, because, I mean, respectfully, he could have came and attacked them as well. So to jeopardize even that much more lives, I don't think that would have been a great, you know, although adrenaline kicks in, but I think, you know, wisdom has to kick in as well. I mean, you don't try to be a hero. It's what they teach you, like if you're trying to be a police officer or in firefighter, you want to make sure that your surroundings are safe and not really going through.
What do you think, Anthony, about this?
Well, you know, I mean, it's easy to say what you're going to do or not do.
Exactly.
You know, but I will tell you one thing, when we talk about our next story, is that you go and you help somebody and they end up suing you. So nowadays, you know, we live in such a strange society where before the Good Samaritan, you know, would be seen as a hero. Now sometimes the Good Samaritan ends up getting sued. You know, so who knows? It's always a bit of a roll of the dice as to, do you intervene? Do you not intervene? Sometimes, you know, you might intervene, and then before you know it, you get charged by the cops as aiding and abetting by a mistake or something if the guy ended up dying. You know, all kinds of weird things can happen, and then your own life ends up getting put into turmoil because you end up getting charged. So there's a lot of variables in terms of what went on, but I think the most important thing to take away from this is it's an absolutely horrifying and tragic incident, but it is an isolated incident. Canada is a very, very safe country.
And that's what makes it so terrifying.
Yeah.
Canada is known to be a very safe country, so when we see things like this, this is not something we're used to seeing.
Well, that's why it's news, because news is really, you know, what's different about what's going on as opposed to what's the norm. So the very fact that it is a major news story means that this does not typify Canada, this does not typify our prairies. At the same time, it's a very personal story. It's a story that's very unique in nature, and it has a strong element of a human face, a young, very good-looking 22-year-old young man who, you know, was very, you know, cared about in his community and you know, and had a lot of friends. But when we look at it in a global context and think that how many of us, you know, had the same reaction to what was going on at 800,000 people hacked to death and decapitated and so forth in Rwanda, and none of us even batted an eye, you know, across the globe. And so I think there's a level of hypocrisy in terms of how we look at some of these incidents.
And for you, the viewer, we want to hear your thoughts on this story as well. It's a horrific incident. We want to hear what your feedback is. Before we go for our break, let's go now to Andy on line 1. Hello, Andy. You're on the line.
Yeah, hi. Really, really sad subject there. And as an ex-cop and somebody who's done, you know, time and, you know, rode with the bad boys there on our Harleys, okay, I know, as anybody else does, that there are genuine amoral psychopaths. They're even in our police forces, some of them. All right. Anyways, okay, that's my first point. The second point is the bystander effect of the passengers who would not intervene, because, you know, there was not a strong alpha male or female, for that matter, who would step in first and then.
So you believe, Andy, that somebody should have stepped in on that bus?
Absolutely. I would have in New York second, okay? But, as I said, I've got all I got behind me, okay? 6'2" and everything else and that and the other, all right, in martial arts. But my point is that You know, there was no alpha person, and the bystander effect kicked in 101%.
Andy, thank you for your call. We're going to have to go for a break. For the rest of you watching, we want to hear your thoughts on this. This is a story that has affected people different ways. We want to hear what you think. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned. Hello again. Welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. Continuing to talk about, and once again I want to warn you, that gruesome murder that happened out west on that bus. We want to hear your thoughts on that story because there are many angles that we're covering here. Want to hear what you think. Ralph on line 4. Hello, Ralph. You're on the line.
Hi. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
I'm just listening to your program, and I find it really disturbing that the focus has changed from this gruesome act that has happened in our country to a notorious thing, granted, that happened in Rwanda.
Yes.
And for me, it sort of comes across as insensitive towards the family and the victim in this crime. And I'd like to focus more on what happened to this young man rather than what happened in Rwanda. And I have a lot of compassion for what happened in Rwanda. That was heinous, and unfortunately I don't think we'll ever know the truth.
Yes.
But it was appalling. It was just disgusting around the globe. But to talk about that while we're talking about something this devastating in our own country just seems disturbing to me.
Well taken, Ralph. Well taken. I'm going to let Anthony respond to that. Anthony.
Yeah, I think
I understand.
I think you have to put things in a context and in terms of what is news or how do we react to news. I think, again, the story is a story because it's in the public domain. If nobody reported on a murder or a decapitation or some serious incident that happens at the individual level, then we wouldn't even be having these types of discussions. So I think it's just in terms of how we treat stories in our country.
This is more than a story, though. Okay, I'm going to put this in perspective, and this is something that the two of you acknowledge. We live in a very peaceful country here.
Absolutely.
What happens in a lot of other nations, yes, we're sorry about it. We know what happens on the global front when it comes to even starvation, yet we still can't get away from the point that we have our own problems here. In fact, and I'm going to confess this, we did a story on global poverty, global hunger. We talked to World Vision, and we were addressing specifically that problem when you look at the catastrophic events happening globally with world starvation. Somebody at that time called in to say, well, we have our own problems here. And my answer to that person at the time was, yes, I know that, but we were talking about what was going on globally. Now, we're doing the same thing here. We're talking about here. And while I do appreciate, Anthony, what happens abroad, because it does give us, you know, a point of view, it's happening there, it raises an awareness. This is something that we pride ourselves in North America, that we could live in a country where we don't have to walk outside and get decapitated or get our arms and legs chopped off, and we've worked hard for that. So when something like this happens, I say thank God for the outcry, because if we did not have such an outcry and we did not have such a value for life in our country, we wouldn't be here enjoying ourselves like this. I want to hear your response to this.
Yeah, I think, again, there's a sensational nature to the crime.
For a reason, though.
Yeah, absolutely. But we have to be careful not to blow things out of proportion, because otherwise you become stagnant, you create a culture of fear, and this is part of what's wrong with our society. And so, I mean, the stigmatization that's going to occur out of this incident that will impact, you know, tens or hundreds of thousands of people who are suffering from mental illness, I don't think is going to be all that fair either. There tends to be an overreaction. I mean, just a few, maybe 10, 15 years ago, Edmund Yu was shot and killed on a bus, you know, because he was allegedly had schizophrenia and was acting, quote, violently by Toronto police. And we know that most people who have schizophrenia actually become very solitary and reclusive, as opposed to
It depends on the type of schizophrenia.
It
depends
does,
on the type,
but it's less than 3%. I mean, the Canadian Mental Health Association will document that. So these events are incredibly rare. It's not, again, a question of insensitivity, but again, it's a fact that what makes the news is what is out of the ordinary. The likelihood of a similar incident occurring in our country of 30 million people is, you know, probably 5 or 6 out of 30 million. The only reason, but as a society, we need to take stock and say, look, this happened. It's tragic. The family is suffering. It's absolutely horrible. But your chances of having been massacred in a place like Rwanda was basically 1 out of 10.
Which really is unrelated to this here. But I hear what you're saying, Anthony, but it's really unrelated here.
Yeah, it's just in terms of what is news and what captures public perception, and how do we contextualize outrage.
Vernal?
Yeah, but I still think that the whole problematic situation is that this becomes a major issue because it is publicized via the media, but more specifically...
It's a major issue because we live in a country where these types of things rarely ever happen.
But then,
that's what makes it a major issue.
But then,
it's morbid. You think about the people that were on that bus and the effect that's going to have on them.
Yeah, but on the flip side...
Yes, go
But
ahead.
on the flip side, what ends up happening is when you see precedents like these happening in such an isolated incident, then other people watch it and read about it in the paper. And if they're going through mental illness, they may actually start to justify that and feel like, you know what? So this is multidimensional because of that, because it's now going to be the outcomes towards those passengers, the families involved, just even feeling safe to go on public transportation.
Of course.
So
And
the magnitude is explosive.
You're concerned about the paranoia.
Yeah.
And I understand. Let's
So
go now to
that's
Laura on line 5. Hello,
issue.
Laura. You're on the line.
Hi. I just basically my comment to this incident. Well, I think why so many Canadians are so focused on this single violence that's happening here is because, like for places like in Rwanda, this type of violence always happen. It's almost like a normal, like day-to-day life.
It's sad, and it's a sad thing. It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like in Canada, when this kind of things happen, it's like a shock because, like
It's not a norm
what
for us.
Anthony says, it's like Canada is a safe country. So when things like this happen, everybody's like, yeah, right, I can't believe it, right? But in Rwanda or places like Iraq, like violence, guns, violence, and killing
way of
is like
life.
an everyday way of life. Yeah,
that's
so
sad.
people are like, oh, okay, it's just another thing. It's their lifestyle almost.
Laura, thanks for that comment. Yes, let's go now to Karzi on line 7. Hello, Karzi. You're on the line.
Hi.
Yes, go ahead.
I have two comments. My first comment is that the police, sometimes they respond to very deadly force, but this time they didn't do anything. And my second point is
Who didn't do anything, Karzi?
the police. I mean, sometimes the police, they shoot innocent people. They kill them, no, sometimes.
Comments about this, that the police didn't do anything? Sometimes they shoot the people. Well, if the man was subdued, they're not going to just come in and shoot him.
Well, they'll taser him nowadays.
Yeah.
Well,
if the man wasn't in a position where he was actively engaged at that point when they arrived and he wasn't a threat, immediate threat, they weren't just going to shoot him like that.
They'll still taser him.
But
I mean,
that still does happen.
we've demonstrated that the police are ready and willing to use their tasers. But
You've got to be very careful with that comment. Very careful with that comment.
But I think, again, that's public outcry, right? I mean, it's happening and everybody knows it. And we're thinking of reevaluating tasers. But I want to...
There's another side to that. That's not what we're debating today, but there's another side to that.
If you pose,
attitudes against the police should not be tolerated in this country. Yes, there are times where we discuss certain police behaviors, what we perceive as, and we have these discussions. But in this case, I'm not going to take a situation as tragic as this, and because the police did not come in and shoot him, that becomes an issue. That is completely off base here.
But although, if this incident had happened on the TTC in Toronto, okay, I can assure you that the first thing that the City of Toronto would be doing would definitely affirm the tragic nature of the event, but they would be bending over backwards to say, hey, wait a minute, the TTC is the safest transportation network in Canada. Now, because this happened in the prairies, in a very isolated domain, on a singular bus, it's treated very differently. So context has a lot to do with what happens when a crime occurs, and then how it's basically played out in the public domain has as much to do in terms of what the reality is.
Yes, okay, let's go now to Jeff on line 1. Hello, Jeff, you're on the line.
Hi.
Hi, Jeff.
I'd like to make a comment. It's a horrific thing that happened. I'm Jewish, and I had family die in the Holocaust. Problem is on a lot of things is that's political. Like Rwanda, it's political. There's other things going on. I think our society, it deeps roots a lot further than just to this point. I guess the point I'm trying to make is I think there's deeper problems. Crime's up, violent crimes are up, drugs are up. Things are happening in our society that we don't like. And I think we got away from values, family values in the home, raising our kids. I work with youth, troubled youth, and I see a lot of this every day. And
And that's dealt with too, though. Comments about this, the two of you, well, you're dealing with troubled youth all the time. And that is an issue that we deal with. We've dealt with that here on the line in its context. Once again, again and again. Yes. Comments about it, though.
We have youth gangs in Canada where youth are hacking off limbs of other youth. Is it getting into the media? No. My question is, why not?
Now, that is a disgrace because that should be Anthony getting into the media.
But
so you're seeing this happening. You know about this happening.
Context of what's going on with that as well.
Well, in terms, I'm just saying that we're dealing with a singular story, and again, it's absolutely being sensitive and affirming the loss and the tragic loss of somebody who was absolutely. But my point is, but many crimes are gruesome, and do they make it into the public domain or the media? You know, I think that it's when we actually play it out and it resonates with us at a very human level. The biggest thing any newspaper or media reporter goes after is a human face to the story. And when you
if it's a murder, it's different too. A murder versus an injury, that's different too.
Absolutely, right? And so in this particular case, all I see at this time is a tragedy for a lot of people who do have mental illness. Obviously, the murderer in this case, there was something very destabilizing about him. He obviously was delusional. And so whatever the reason is, it really is a broader discussion in terms of, we need to look at why do people who do have mental illness, why aren't they getting the help they need in our country?
Yes.
Yeah, there's other issues and other implications with the Mental Health Act. It's very complicated. But more specifically, what I see with that gentleman, we're speculating a lot regarding his mental issues. But the truth of the matter is there are many people who do crimes like that who are fully aware of what they're doing, and then they turn around and say temper insanity. So we're not trying to negate and lighten the subject to make it seem like...
Although this one was a bit different. The guy was just
I agree, but there's a lot of people in the legal system are told to say that it's temper insanity, and then they get a lighter sentence. So I'm not saying that in this case specifically, but we tend to kind of use the Mental Health Act to kind of promote our case or kind of
You know what, you bring up a good point there. We'll continue to talk about it after the break. Stay tuned. Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. We're joking during the break here, but this is a very serious issue that we're talking about, and I'm not going to make light of this. It's a very serious issue. We were just talking about something else during the break. Now, I want to hear what your thoughts are about this particular issue here. We're hearing a lot of angles coming in here. Very different viewpoints, I must say, than what I expected. But I'm going to get back to you on the phone lines now. Let's go now to you, Tala, on line 2. Hello, Tala. You're on the line.
Hello.
Hi, Tala.
Christine. Hi. Christine, nobody has mentioned the fact that the fellow that committed the murder planned it because he got onto the bus with a knife, knowing that he was going to use it. So that's premeditated.
Now, it's interesting what you're saying.
Never mentioned that.
Tala, thanks for your comments. In a way, I've heard something like that. Many people are asking the question, how come it's not first-degree murder? But I'm not a legal expert. I've spoken to many, and I will tell you that when you look at the criminal code, and you're going to have to check this out yourself, when you use terms like premeditated murder, the law is very specific. Just because somebody comes on with a knife does not mean they intended to use that knife, that it was a carried out plan. You see, when you're looking at premeditated murder, you have to actually plan and execute a plan here. And although he came on with that knife, he may have been under some delusional, God knows what, doing this. But to say that he planned that over time and premeditated and carried it out, that's not quite the case here.
And you need the proof, too.
And you need the proof, right. So perhaps that's the reason why he should be given a trial. I'm not sure. Many are saying it's a waste of money. How do you two think about it?
He might have thought he was just going on a hunting trip.
Did you think it's a waste of money, by the way? He may have thought, yeah?
I think a lot of things in our society are a waste of money, especially when lawyers and courts are involved.
What about this one, though? Considering how many witnesses there were, considering it was obvious, do you think it needs a trial or just a judge?
You need a trial because you're innocent until you're proven guilty. So you need
Even though everybody saw you there?
but you still need to prove it. You still need to prove your
Slippery
facts.
slope.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you know, I mean, we have systems in our society. They're very imperfect, and they have to pertain equally to all people in our society, regardless.
It becomes a very slippery slope otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that in this particular case, what needs to happen is the man needs to undergo a full psychiatric evaluation, and I think should there be a long trial? Absolutely not.
I agree there.
But I think at this point, what we need to be doing is we need to be rallying around the friends and the loved ones of the young man who was murdered, and we have to rally around the family of the man who committed the murder, because apparently he left a wife and his kids back home in Edmonton. Can you imagine what's going on with them? And so I think there's always there's unfortunately in these there's only victims. Whenever you have these kinds of incidents, there's only victims. And so, you know, this man, obviously there was something tragically wrong with him. He's left behind his wife and his kids in Edmonton. This young man, his family and friends are all completely you know, horrified and devastated by this. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at, and there's a lot of unanswered questions. But I think
there are a lot of unanswered questions.
But I think as a society, we need to appreciate the solitary nature of this. We must not jump to stereotypes around people with mental illness. We must not jump to you know, stereotypes or a fear that taking public transportation is going to be all of a sudden dangerous.
Or I'm going to add in my own little gripe here. Or what a doctor was quoted as saying in one of the articles, it's not uncommon that you get these kinds of delusional people saying, oh, they're acting on behalf of voices claiming to be Jesus. And this is the devil here with the voices telling them they want to execute the devil. That's another thing. Fear of religious people. That's another stereotype.
And it's, again, it's just another stereotype. And even in terms of that particular element in the story, I saw, again, no need for bringing it in.
Absolutely not.
Somebody
doesn't even relate here.
No, you know, and so all I'm trying to do is when I talk about Rwanda is just that context. But,
I understand. We understand. Yeah.
The only thing that I would say is that, again, referring back to health and safety, is this. I think it's really opened our eyes that, you know what, don't take for granted the safety when you go into public transportation, because that's ultimately, to me, in the bigger picture, what's going on. It's just because I'm sure that gentleman couldn't even imagine that was going to happen to him, let alone say us, who's now giving feedback on the issue.
Don't take for granted, but don't become paranoid either.
Yeah, so it's a balance. Find the balance of anything in life. That's what we need, right?
We're going to go back to you now on the phone lines, and we're going to go through you very quickly. Let's go now to Laura on line 1. Hello, Laura. You're on the line.
Hi, I was just calling because it seemed before they were kind of deviating from the subject, but now I completely agree with what you guys are saying. Like, we're all Canadian citizens, and what happened was completely horrible, and we need to all, I think, feel for that family, because we're Canadians, and they are as well, and we owe them that respect, just as being the same citizen as them. So that's everything.
Thanks for calling in, Laura. Let's go now to Michelle on line 7. Hello, Michelle. You're on the line.
Hello.
Hello, Michelle.
Hi. I'm calling from Toronto. What amazes me about this story is that I cannot imagine a busload full of people. I mean, I'm sure it took more than 30 seconds for the individual to commit this crime. So I can't even imagine how there was no one on the bus that could jump in to, you know, pull this gentleman off the kid, right? That's the part that amazes me.
Many people have expressed that point of view, Michelle. Thanks for calling in. And we talked about it here, too. Let's go now to Tamara on line 5. Hello, Tamara. You're on the line.
Yes, Christine. Hello, and guests. I feel that why are we not taking same precautions as we do for air travel, for long-distance bus or train travel?
Tamara, thanks for calling in. I think that's what we're going to be seeing, perhaps new rules now as a result of this horrific tragedy. We're going to go for a break. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned. Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. We're going on to our second subject matter now. Take a look at the headline. Jury awards jilted bride $150,000. Maybe it's better put, more accurately put, jury awards jilted fiancé $150,000, because she wasn't a bride yet. She didn't go down the aisle. What this article is saying here is, this woman, okay, this here happened in Florida, but she was engaged to the guy, and her premise was she left a job paying $80,000 to move to where he was for something like $40,000 for a new job, and he didn't marry her. Breach of contract, so now he has to pay $150,000 out to her. Wow.
Breach of common law action.
The nation of suing, okay? This happened in the States, but hey, there's a certain premise here that we all need to look at. Do you agree with this? Whose side are you on here?
I see both sides of the story, and I'm not trying to be sitting on the fence. I understand totally where the female feels that she was jilted because there was it's like a promissory note. You promised to marry me, you didn't follow through. The other extent is that I think what people have to understand that with like a wedding ring, it's a conditional gift. Like, I mean, if somebody's engaging you, if they don't follow through, then they would have to give back the ring and those things in place. But just because someone is like proposing to you, it does not necessarily imply that they are bound to marry you. That's why even at the altar, you have an option out to the very altar. So I do understand. I think her direction was more what she gave up in lieu of, and that's where I think the strongest point is. But off record, if it wasn't that specific situation, I think people need to understand it is a conditional. And so if the person doesn't opt to do it, it doesn't necessarily mean that each and every situation that you should get off just because you're not marrying someone. There's a lot, I mean, people are entitled to their free will.
Yeah.
Up until the altar. So.
Until the altar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the facts.
Anthony?
That's what the law says.
Well, how do we know that she didn't drive him crazy and maybe he should countersue for mental anguish? You know, I mean,
hey, you might.
You know, yeah, I think fair is fair. I think, you know, we've become a very litigious society. Obviously, this is an American story. We're following suit in Canada. We don't. Obviously, I think there is the notion of the contract law is there. Again, it's like, does somebody put, you know, force you to leave your job and go and take a lower paying job somewhere else? That needs to be taken into account. But you know, when we're in love, we do a lot of things that do not make rational sense.
That's another show on its own, isn't it?
So you know, so I think that in a nutshell, I think basically this case is you know, is $150,000. Well, you know, she gave up $50,000 per year, so it's basically saying that, you know, she's getting back, you know, a couple of years' salary plus some bonuses, right, or in 3 years of lost salary. But I think, you know, when we look at these, it's really no different than getting married and then divorced and having a settlement. So I think in this case, it's just something that we need to look at it as people and say, look, if we're getting involved with somebody, we need to know what that means, and we need to know that sometimes it may start well, but sometimes if it doesn't always end well. But I think the moral of this particular story is, you know, hell hath no greater fury than a woman scorned.
For you, the viewers, whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the guy that now has to pay $150,000 because he happened to, well, jump out of a so-called marriage agreement? He was engaged to the woman. According to the laws here, it's suggesting, well, it was a promise. But at the same time, we don't know the situation of why he did it. Or are you on the side of the jilted bride who came all the way from Pensacola to Gainesville and lost her income? Because I have a question for the two of you, and for you, the viewer. She made that choice as well, and I'm pushing the envelope here. She made that choice for some reason to give up that salary to go with him. You said it's free will. We have her free will. She also made hers. I understand both, but yes, go ahead. You have something to say on that note.
My inclination is I understand totally why she did it, because the argument based on the article was talking about the common law. So in other words, almost implied that they were technically, from a legal perspective, were already married. So it's, for her concern, she was more concerned with the settlement aspect. So when I look at it legally, I totally understand why she did it. But I think when you look at it from an emotional perspective, you'd have to say, you know what, that was your choice to give up your job. But then her premise is, I gave up my job and I gave up my life. I've been common law with you. You promised to marry. So my whole course of life have deviated to reflect this. So I understand where she's coming from a legal perspective, but from an emotional perspective and someone being married, I mean, these are the facts of life.
Even legally, in terms of his right, she moves from Pensacola to Gainesville, okay? That's what happened here. The guy got to know her better, and I'm looking at it from the other perspective. Suppose there were certain character flaws in the woman that the guy just couldn't take. I mean, okay, let's look at the implications of this. Engagements get broken off.
All the time.
A lot. All the time. You'll go so far as to say, you know what, I'm going to second that all the time. Many of those that get broken off, perhaps most of them, they'll all tell you, well, it's a good thing because it would have been worse had I gone to the altar and realized who I was marrying. So what does this open? Do you think it opens a can of worms?
Absolutely.
People need to think twice before they get engaged. Men are always accused already of being afraid. Yeah, pre-engagement nuptial. Men are already accused, and I'm being, you know, here.
No, but I
Men are
understand
accused of being afraid of commitment. Does this make it worse?
No, because from her perspective, it's the common law. Like they were together for a certain period. So I'm saying that it negates everything of what we're talking about now, because they were still common law. And under common law, you still have to go the same implications of if you want to break up, it's the same thing as if you were actually married. You know?
In certain respects.
And in certain states, in certain provinces, I understand that. But the fact is, her emphasis is that this was a common law already, and now you're not going through with the marriage, so then you made her change her course of life. That's the legal aspect that she's referring to, and I understand what she's saying. You know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, just because you ask somebody, you know, you agree to marry someone, you still have to know that things can happen along the way, that it may not work out. But legally, I think she was more concerned of what she lost financially, and that's what she wanted to take back out with her. That was her premise, and I think she was justified.
We're going to go for a break. We'll return after this. Stay tuned.
The Adventures of Willpower! Ow!
You okay there, Willpower?
Indeed, m'lady.
But these are Oreo sensations.
Sensations?
They're delicious.
Delicious.
There's a lot of them,
Yeah.
and they're 100 calories.
Yeah. It can't be.
But I'm going to Jen's birthday next week. There'll be cake.
Cake?
I may need your help then.
Jen's all right if I'm there?
Yep.
Because last time it got weird.
With Thin-Sations, no willpower is required. Thin-Sations are one super treat.
Get ready for the night that will change your life forever.
The Lord has sent me to bring you a special word, a special message. You hear the word like you never heard it preached before.
2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9, it says, "For we know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, for your sakes."
When we pray that night, you will be healed. You'll receive a miracle. You'll receive a special blessing in your life. Something special will happen to you.
What eyes? Healed by the power of God. Look at that! Somebody shout hallelujah!
It will be a night of healing and the miraculous.
From 6 p.m. till dawn, all night long. A one-night event. So call the telephone lines today and ask for a seat. And also, you can reserve seats for those who are coming with you. Don't miss it.
If you have difficulty getting in and out of the tub, you don't have to worry anymore. Premier Bathrooms brings freedom and safety to your life.
Yeah, we were afraid of someone falling in the tub and having an accident.
There is no uncertainty about stepping in. It's very safe.
Makes me feel that I don't have to worry about her.
Premier Bathrooms custom bath enclosures are easy to step into. Feature sturdy hand grips and safety bars, secure locking mechanisms, and contoured seating.
Well, it was marvelous. Very relaxed.
Just wonderful.
Rejuvenate yourself with Premier Bathrooms hydrotherapy jets. You don't have to fear slipping and falling anymore. Call Premier Bathrooms for yourself or call for someone you love. Call now and Premier Bathrooms will send you a free information kit.
Call 1-866-924-7614.
Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line, continuing to talk about the jilted fiancé awarded $150,000. You had a point you wanted to make there.
No, I was just saying, I mean, where do we stop with relationships? You know, you meet somebody, you say, hey, do you want to go out on Friday night? And then somebody whips out a contract and says, here, go through the checklist. And this is just in case anything goes wrong on the date. You know, I mean, I think we run a very slippery slope. And the only people who get rich on other people's misery are lawyers and courtrooms. So I think as people, we need to understand that, you know what, when we are making, I don't think anybody can say forever. You know, obviously what happened, somebody said to me one day that love is a biological emotion that lasts for 6 months. I think it was one of my university professors at U of T teaching theory of emotion. And, you know, and so, but the fact is that love is decision. Once the euphoria of the initial feeling goes away, it's very different. And even more so, it's different when you're actually living with somebody. And so to sit there and say, wait a minute here, you know, you moved in together, you've come across a distance, and you realize, oh, hey, wait a minute, we can't really live together or make this work, and then to have the repercussion of getting sued for 150 grand, I mean, that's quite, you know, a jump.
Yes. The only thing I want to say, just regarding with the common law contract action, is just I think people should maybe second guess if living together is going to be, your decision making, because we're seeing that a lot of people are living together, but it's not necessarily producing necessarily better marriages or even going towards marriage. They stay common law for a long, long time and don't ever go into the marriage. So I think it's just making you realize, should I really even be common law, or should I just go right into the marriage aspect? Because that's a choice you're taking either way.
You wonder in this particular case if she'd moved in, but they weren't living common law, whether it would have been different.
Probably.
If they weren't living, you think it would have been different?
Well,
when you're common law, when you're living together, it changes everything.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think that's part of it.
You think she would have been awarded that? Let's suppose she had moved with him to Gainesville, and they weren't living common law. They were living separate, but still she had moved from her $80,000 a year job to her $40,000 a year job. Do you really think she would have been awarded that $150 if he had jolted her? You don't think so? What about you?
No, they wouldn't have.
I think it's living together
the actual
and
act of cohabiting.
Yeah.
So it ended up being like a marriage.
Well, it's common law.
Yeah, it's common law.
So that's what happened.
That's what
and this
I'm
is
looking
what,
at it.
yes.
Yeah.
But it's funny because the headline, when you look at the headline, it just sounds like, well, the fiance, but they were actually living together, and it
changed everything.
It changes a lot.
It changes everything. A conjugal relationship is different.
Yes. And we're going to go on to our third subject matter now. Let's take a look at it now on our screen. This is an issue that's been looked at for quite some time. Drivers face cell restrictions. Now, well, there's a proposal now. It's about to go through as legislation, and according to this article, it's a range here. The title talks about cell phones, but this particular bill is looking at banning anything electronic while behind the wheel.
Does that mean a car radio?
Well, you see, by what's inferred here, it doesn't imply a radio, but you know what? What you're saying there really does point to a whole different area. Where do we draw the line here?
When you're using a BlackBerry, and God knows I'm as guilty of this as anybody else. I mean, I'm texting and
you text while you're
emailing.
driving?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I can
Which is more difficult than just listening on a cell phone.
I've had a few incidents as a result. I won't use the word accidents, but I've had a few incidents. And so, but they've done studies that have demonstrated that it's as dangerous using a cell phone as drinking and driving, if not more so. I think nowadays we have more accidents being caused by using cell phones or texting than we do even with alcohol. Drinking and driving types of incidents. So I think it's definitely something that is needed. I can tell you one quick story just in terms of this article, because when this young man from Ajax was killed, and his 2-year-old daughter, and I remember they mentioned the name on the news, and I remember hearing the first name on the news, and I immediately thought it sounded, the age was right of the daughter and the father, and the just in terms of the description, I thought it was my friend and his daughter. And I remember hearing this, and I immediately for the next 2 hours was trying to figure what phone. I couldn't get a hold of my friend, so all of a sudden I thought it was him. So these things really can hit. I mean, from my point of view, that hit me in a devastating way. And at that point, I remember I didn't even talk on my cell phone for a good close to 6 to 7 months after that while I was driving. But then I got into my bad old habits.
And then you started back.
I was waiting to hear that.
Let's face it, a lot of you, and if everybody owns up to it, most people, I would say, use their cell phones while driving. Would you like to see a ban? Now, there are really two sides of this, because I hear a lot of people saying, well, maybe it's time for a ban, but at the same time, people don't want to give that convenience up. How do you feel about it? How do you feel about a total ban on electronics while driving? Because I can just hear people saying, too, what about people, I saw a guy shaving. I'm not kidding you. Yeah. I keep hearing the stories about women putting on their lipstick while they're driving. Well, I saw a guy shaving while he was driving.
I did that only because I heard that same story.
Was you mean?
No, but I thought, what a great idea.
It didn't look like you.
What I'd have to say personally, I understand what's going on, but I think that the operative word is distractions. I don't think it's limited to electronics. I mean, people are drinking coffees and they're in a stupor, they're meditating, they're doing all these different things. So to say that the ban is a bit strong, I don't think so. I think it's about safety, and distractions
are... You think it's a good thing?
I think it's a good thing, only based on safety.
Big question, where do you draw the line? We want to hear your thoughts. We're going to go for a break. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned. Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. Let's go now to you, Mary, on line 4. Hi, Mary. You're on the line. Yes, go ahead, Mary. You might have to try...
I really appreciate your program today.
Well, thank you.
And I'm phoning to defend the man on the bus and also about the wedding. I have 2 comments. The man on the bus did everything a human being could possibly do. He got everybody off safely, and he also, on top of it all, made sure the bus was shut, but he went back to check on that passenger after he got everybody off the bus, and he heard no more yelling coming from him. He heard nothing. He knew the man was dead. So he didn't intervene. While he's throwing up and going through hell himself personally, he did everything possible he could do. We in Edmonton know, we've read the stories. We also know that the man in question was here in Canada 4 years only. He had come from China, and my Chinese friend, who's an engineer in Edmonton, told me that they have knife stabbings in China all the time. It's can be very violent over there.
Yes.
Anyway, I heard just a few days later on the news myself that 16 policemen were stabbed to death in China. Now, if policemen can't protect themselves, how could a citizen, ordinary citizen like you and I, Christine, protect ourselves?
Valid.
That man did everything he could. I want to stand up for him. He did everything he possibly could for that passenger.
Credit to that man, too. Thanks for calling in with that, Mary. You had another comment as well?
The wedding part?
Yes,
the
about the wedding.
I have? Oh, yeah. I think that somebody has to make sure when...
Keep on going.
Yeah, with regards to the wedding part, I think that everybody has to presume that they must think very carefully before they do anything, including getting rid of a job or whatever when they're going into a marriage.
I agree.
Because you just never know what will happen. And so that's my main comment.
Your comments are very reasonable. I agree. I feel kind of uncomfortable with the whole suing thing. I mean, we really don't know the full circumstance around this particular incident because it doesn't give a detailed story. But at the same time, she made a decision as well. Any quick comments here, what we were talking about?
Well, no, I've gone through that situation. I've been involved, had relationships where, my job is very, very, very demanding. My job is not healthy for relationships. But the thing is that I've had former partners who've wanted me to quit my job so I can spend more time with them. And obviously, I'm still on my job, but I'm not in the relationship. So I think that my kids would have something to say about me just up and quitting my job and impacting their lifestyle.
Yeah,
so I think
no kidding, they would.
Yeah, marriage is a commitment, and it's a serious institution. So I think that we need to treat it that way. And as people, we need to just be sure.
Vernal, I'm not going to let you off the hook on this one. Why are you laughing?
No, it's because we were expecting to hear that from him. So we're both looking. I'm looking at you. You're looking at him. I'm like, okay, I was expecting to hear that comment right here, right now.
We heard a whole personal angle.